Well, hello and welcome back to the Grow Free with Emma B podcast. We've had a 2-month break for the summer holiday, and in each episode of this podcast, we follow a monthly theme that we have in the Grow Free community. Our community is a peer support community for healing from trauma, big traumas, little traumas, personal and cultural. We're interested in all its forms and all forms of healing. Our purpose is to support our members to find freedom from the limiting patterns and imprints of trauma, and one by one, in this way, to be part of the evolution towards more freedom for humanity. Our programme is based on the spiral of natural growth that occurs again and again in nature. We speak about 6 interconnected points on this spiral, a spiral that gets disrupted when we experience trauma. Within the programme, we have 6 different, we have different courses, not 6, we have different courses, workshops and support and practice opportunities. The courses are developed by professional and lived experience, and they're informed by the common wisdom across a multitude of approaches to healing. We believe hearing different perspectives and having a choice of tools and approaches is supportive of truly unique, authentic journeys of healing and growth. Our culture is inclusive and empowering. We're about to embark on our first round of peer supporter training. Super excited about this. This is people that have been through our courses and have stepped up and said, yeah, I'd like to train now so that I can co-facilitate the course. I can use my experience to support other people, and some, hopefully more, will start looking into creating their own workshops and their own courses that they can deliver. We're all about blending the wisdom and integrity of professional and lived experience in ways that create a safe, authentic space for growth and healing. Our community is experiencing its own spiral of growth. As members, we're setting up as a social enterprise, so we can use our combined creative potential to carry out our purpose and support new members. So as more and more of us transform our own trauma and step into our creativity, the more we can offer as a community. And if you're listening and you'd like to be part of something like this, come and check out what we're up to at community.grow-free.com. That's community.grow-free.com. In the community, these monthly themes give us a focus on an aspect of trauma and healing that's emerging for our members. The theme gives us a focus, and we combine the challenges and tools that are present and available for us to learn from. My name's Emma Baxter. I'm a founding member of Grow Free, and I bring both professional yoga training and lived experience of trauma and recovery, among other things, to our community. In these podcasts, I invite people I know who have a lot to offer and share with us through their own training and experience to have a conversation with me around our monthly theme. This month, the theme is transmuting shame or embracing darkness. So it's been helpful for me to learn how trauma leaves us stuck for longer than helpful in darkness or dark emotional energy. Personally, I've been really stuck in what we could call darkness. I've been stuck in depression, anxiety and shame, and it's been helpful for me to learn that shame and all our emotions have a biological underpinning. It's really helped me become less attached to them or less identified with the sensations and the stories that arise from these feelings. Given me more freedom from them. It's helped me find bodily practices to regulate these emotions, to find more balance and to find lighter perspectives and stories to put on them. Healing has come for me as I've learned to be with these emotions and befriend them in a way that lets them feel heard without them continuing to rule my life and trample over others. When I learned that shame was an experience of defeat that got stuck, an experience that we weren't able to handle, that was too big for us and the feeling that's left after that is shame. It really made a lot of sense to me of what I was experiencing. And it really helped to start to dissolve the shame a little bit. I just perpetually felt unable to survive. I felt like a liability to the social group. I felt completely unacceptable. I absolutely couldn't see how I could show anyone what was really going on inside and still be accepted. And I was still experiencing some of this when I heard today's guest speaking on a webinar with a mentor of mine. And what I really appreciated from hearing Catherine Björksten talk was how honest she was about her own current feelings as a practitioner, who was also wise and of great value to humanity. I think that started to help me question the story that I had. That was over a year ago that I listened to Catherine, and I've integrated other information and support and healing since then, and Catherine's words have often come back to me as I have. So I'm delighted to welcome Catherine.
Thank you.
Rather than me trying to introduce you, I'd like to just hand it over to you so you can just let people know what you'd like to let them know about you, who you are, what you do.
Thank you so much, Emma. It's really a joy to be here with you, and thanks for trusting me here on an episode with you. And I'm so glad that, you know, what I shared really was of benefit, because very often we don't know actually what, you know, we share and the impact that it has on people. We don't always get the feedback, which is why I think it's so important to still follow authentically what we want to share, because we don't always know the impact that it has, and sometimes we'll never know. And in a way, when you're any kind of form of practitioner in the healing space, that's in a way our assignment. It really is to share our journey. And it doesn't have to be, you know, oversharing, going into drama and all of this, because it's not, you know, like public therapy, but there is a very kind of important space, which is owning your story, finding what's relevant, because if it's relevant to you, it certainly is to other people around you, and sharing it when you're able to talk about it in a way that you're not completely floored by it. But, you know, anyone who's gone through anything difficult, which is the vast majority of, you know, the population that is over maybe 3 years of age, even if we think that, you know, at 3 you wouldn't have experienced something really difficult, but you have actually, because the things that you were talking about, you know, look, the experiences that are really difficult to handle, they leave this imprint that you mentioned. And one of the things that I find is really important in what I do is to help people understand that they are so much more than what they think they are. So you can call it a spiritual awakening, you can call it having more self-awareness, self-development. I really see it as a spiritual awakening, and I'll get to that as I explain this. Mm-hmm. I think the more authenticity we can bring and more sharing from the heart, the more we allow others to do the same. So it really is a ripple effect. So the more we get to know ourselves, I think personally that know thyself is the most potent medicine that there is for people as individuals and for us all as a collective. So when we step into that space of really trying to understand who we are so that we can free ourselves from the conditioning that we all go through, I believe that's like, you know, the human initiation. We choose as souls which families we're going to be incarnated in, what type of cultures, what gender. All of this is going to have an effect on kind of molding us into a certain person. And then at some point, when usually it's a big loss that will happen in our lives, or something that really shocks us, and we'll start questioning, like, is this really who I am? Is this really what life is about? Etc., etc. And then we get to this crossroad of like, what can I do to really embody who I truly am? And with that comes, like, you know, people refer to it as a dark night of the soul, or looking at your shadow. There are many different expressions of that, but I think it's inevitable. And within the spiritual community, and especially recently, because spirituality has become a bit of a commodity. It's kind of like what's in right now. People want to escape the humanness, to transcend and to become more spiritual. But what a lot of people miss out on is that our humanness is the gateway. If we bypass the humanness and everything that it means to be a human being, we're still going to do the same thing, you know, spiritually or on our soul level, because we will bypass all these lessons that are massive, you know, stepping stones for our soul evolution. So that's kind of what I do. I support people on this journey of awakening by offering, you know, a roadmap and also a support system, because a lot of people go through their awakening alone, especially in societies like, you know, modern Western society, where we don't have, you know, an official role for the elders or the medicine people or the shamans. We're kind of like left to our own devices, standing in the middle of Tesco when all of this is going on, you know. So it's a different type of awakening. And I feel really, really passionately about this, because a lot of my own awakening has been quite lonely, you know, because I've grown up in a society that's not supportive of the spiritual side of things, unless it would be, you know, organized religion, which didn't work for me. So that's a little intro for you as to what I do and how I look at things, really.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And your main training to begin with, your main...
So originally I was in business school and got a master's degree in business. So I was in advertising for quite a long time, and I was always interested in human behavior. That's why I chose advertising and also the creative artistic side of things. And then I was more and more pulled towards, like, I really want to work with people and understand the human condition. So I had my own journey and, you know, changes that were going on in my life, and had a big awakening when I moved to London, actually, which was about 18 years ago. And I was a big party animal and very, you know, like very sociable, and, you know, and my body just, and my soul was just like, we're not doing this anymore. You know, like, you're running away from yourself. Now it's time to meet yourself. So I started a course at the College of Psychic Studies in London in psychic development. And that led me a little bit further down the line to study psychotherapy in transpersonal psychotherapy. And from there on, I did a diploma in spiritual counselling with the Holistic Healing College, which was really awesome. It was a 1.5-year program. And then all the more kind of traditional initiations started happening, because I met some incredible people who were of the Andean Peruvian tradition. They're called the Pacos. They're basically, which means gatekeeper. And they're the indigenous people of the Peruvian Andes. And when I met them, something really kind of like clicked. And I met them around the time that I went on a vision quest, which is a Native American rite of passage. So everything just collided, you know, like I met all these people, my marriage fell apart, and it always goes together. It's like, it never rains, it pours. And from there on, I apprenticed with them for quite a while. I was traveling back and forth to Peru for 3 years. And it was a real privilege to work, you know, with people who have like these unbroken lineages. And then I've had also some support and mentoring from amazing elders from various traditions. I've been very fortunate to meet incredible, you know, spiritual leaders from these unbroken lineages. And I am currently in the middle of a shamanic training, which is much more based on, you know, our own culture here in Europe, and how do we, you know, reawaken this wisdom keeping here instead of having to travel. You know, some people are drawn to Asia and do the whole yoga, and, you know, and then you have people who are drawn more to South America and everything that comes with that. So there's been a whole bunch from, you know, working with these amazing people, the Pacos in the Andes, with their mountain medicine. That's the main medicine that they work with, obviously with the earth very much as well. So it really is like an animistic and shamanic kind of approach that I work with the most, where we can't remove ourselves from nature, and other people. Like everything is just a big weave and it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
And that's including spirit.
Yeah. That's definitely the approach we take in Grow Free, and it's a process of, for me, becoming more aware of those connections, having the intellectual understanding we're all connected, and then it becoming more tangible. And that part of it for me is quite exciting in a way. And I guess that touches in then on this idea, so the theme around embracing darkness. You've touched there on your journey, and how you said it never rains, it pours, that there was a lot going on, you could call that a sort of crisis time in your life that maybe made you dig deeper into your training and your practice. I'm interested in, like, specifically your relationship with the darkness. Call it darkness, call it shame, call it fear, dark emotional energies. I don't know, so many different ways we could describe it, and that's part of the Grow Free approach, is about looking through different lenses.
Yeah,
that's been helpful for me, whether it's a more kind of contemporary psychological definition.
Yeah.
What's your experience around that relationship and how it shifted? You spoke about often we spiritually bypass.
Yeah.
So my journey with some of this shame and fear is needing to believe, definitely bypassing, but not realizing I was doing it, needing to believe I'd overcome it. How's your relationship with those emotions developed?
Much better now. It's not been pretty. Which actually is the whole purpose, is like, it is not a pretty journey. And I think that's also like a big misunderstanding that a lot of people have been fed. It's a bit also, what yoga went through with the whole Lululemon phase, and becoming more like a take on like fitness, rather than, a whole spiritual lineage and ways of, growing. It was more kind of like physically based, and which totally defeats the purpose of the whole thing. To go back to the Pacos, who I apprenticed with in the Andes, they have a word for like the heavy energy that encompasses, whether it's shame or fear or anger, or they call it hucha, which means heavy energy. And most traditions would have, like, everybody that I've met in these different lineages, they obviously all recognize the darkness. It's not like, oh, it doesn't exist, we just all live in perfect harmony, etc. Like it's the nature of the human being. It's to be like, this duality of light and dark. And my personal experience of this, it took me like pretty like dark, and it's been like dancing with the dark. I think when we live in a society that feeds our addictions as much as we want, which helps us to not feel everything that's underneath, like all this darkness. And then when we start to like step onto a path that is more conscious, those aspects, like those crutches, will start to be taken away from us one way or another, whether we're drinking, whether it's, relationships, whether it's food, whatever it is that we use to distract. And then we meet ourselves, and then we start realizing what is our own, what's our own journey with the darkness, whether it's shame, fear, anxiety, depression, you name it. And at that point in time, we have a choice. Either we can try to go back and, patch things up with whatever we've used before. And I would not recommend that, because once you're called into consciousness, it's much more painful to revert to the way you think, the way you did things before, than to actually confront them and meet them and transform them. So when we get to that point where we start recognizing our own darkness, what we're taught a lot is acceptance. It's like, this is how it is. One of the things that I noticed when I was going through various cycles, but the one that you heard of on Maya's platform, was when, after a breakdown that I had, or burnout, however you want to call it, after 7 years of really intense stress, like really, really like big things. And I completely I didn't know what was happening to me. I just knew that I was really spent. My nervous system was in fight or flight 24/7, and it wouldn't calm down. So, my mind was just like in complete overstimulation. And I was like, I can't get out of this thing. And it's like, I feel like I'm gonna give into it, and that's the end of me. The only thing that really helped, well, obviously, besides rest and a lot of support, and also, really bringing in professionals who knew how to deal with it, instead of thinking, I can just take a bit of, drops of, essential oils. I think it's also really important in the spiritual realm and the spiritual community to accept when we really need more professional help, as in, if we don't believe in allopathic health, sometimes that's what we need to also integrate. So, but all of this taught me that I really need to accept where I am. And I think that's the biggest teaching of the shadow in general. It's like, this is where you are, or this is, this is what you are, or who you are. Not like by definition, you can never change this, but this is where you are, and you need to be with this. And the shadow teaches us discomfort. And the only way to grow and to transmute something is to go through it. There's no other way. I've tried. It's not working. So I think, it's really important to accept the shadow and the darkness as a teacher, and to not resist it, and to have great support when you're going through it, because I think it can be very difficult, as we were talking also about earlier, before we started recording this. Sometimes we don't even know what we're doing, and that's where we get stuck. And that's the whole point of the shadow. The shadow is unconscious because it's so painful. Like, at some point, whatever happened, whatever our belief system was locked, and then, we just kind of live based on all these belief systems without even being aware of them. So when they come, to the forefront, that's when we have a choice. And one of the other things that I think is really important to note when it comes to the shadow is that we can do all the mental work and all the talking therapies, but a lot happens in our bodies as well. And somatic work, whatever approach one feels called to, whether it's dancing, yoga, working with somebody who does somatic experience, is a really essential part of the journey, because there are some things that are stuck in our bodies that we can't, vocalize, we can't explain them, we can't understand them. So to sum it up, I think our shadow and the darkness in general is a great ally of healing, but it's really important to not stay there for longer than we need to.
There's a couple of questions have come up for me through that.
Yeah.
So definitely recently, even in the last few weeks, my ability to appreciate and accept darkness, shadow, shame, yoga they would call it, dukkha, whatever, has definitely grown. And the kind of a real awareness that both are necessary parts of life.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard that before intellectually. You can't see the light without the dark. And I'd be like, yeah, right. But so like actually being able to hold it is bringing that understanding deeper. So, and I know previously I was always trying to overcome it. I was trying to overcome and move beyond it. In fact, I probably even used that language in some of the courses, let's move beyond. Whereas, so this morning I had a bit of stuff going on, and I was much more able to be like, right, you're here, I feel you, I'm not chasing you away. so really both are important, and well, not even just important, they just exist. Like, they exist, so we can't try and deny them. I'm just wondering there, what cropped up into my mind was, do you think, is everything that's unconscious about survival?
I think so, because it becomes unconscious because it's too painful. And our survival mechanisms are here to keep us alive. So if we don't feel safe, we go into survival to protect whatever it is that we've buried.
Yeah.
I mean, unless obviously for, obvious situations where it is important actually that we are in survival kind of response. And I think it's really important to point that out, because sometimes, actually, my shamanic teacher used that example from another teacher he heard, is that, there were people who were going into a ceremony and he said, don't pray for taking away your fear, because otherwise I'm going to have to deal with several people's dead bodies, because our fear protects us,
Mm.
So we have to also be realistic about, not getting rid of all survival. And also, our body knows. So for instance, and that's the tricky part when you become very like conscious about everything. It's like, is this my survival? Is my body telling me really this? Like, which one is it? About people, for instance, that we meet, then they can trigger something in us because it reminds us of something that obviously was difficult for us, or our body is telling us, okay, this is not a good idea, like move away. So it's a tricky balance. I think, the more conscious we become, to be really aware of what's talking. And that's just practice.
Yeah. And I heard something really useful recently that helped me was, I think she was talking about that, that the language of intuition. If you were learning a foreign language, you wouldn't expect yourself to know it fluently. Straight away.
Yeah, that's true.
It takes time to.
Yeah.
And even then, when you start to recognize it a bit, then it takes more time to learn, okay, well, what's a helpful response here?
Yeah.
So then, in terms of acceptance, your book, I might missay the name here, Unconditional Love. Remind me the name of your book.
It's called You Are Loved, Essential Spirit Guides and Guardians. Yeah.
So the concept of unconditional love has obviously been around for a while. The experience that I'm getting of it is kind of more recent, and it's definitely a big part for me. And if there's light and dark, the more light you can let in, the more you can hold the darkness, I guess. The more you can bring in. Whether this is about your personal journey or working with other people, what kinds of approaches do you take? What insight could you offer here, in terms of how we can move from finding it hard to hold that darkness, maybe denying it, feeling overwhelmed by it, ruled by it, slowly, I guess, befriending it, finding more balance with it, shifting through, instead of getting stuck for 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, maybe 3 hours?
I think, first of all, I mean, I've thought about that a lot, because, the cycles that would take me 6 months, let's say 20 years ago, I can, I'm not even in them anymore. But I think it depends a lot also on how dedicated you are to consciousness. And I think not everyone is invited to walk this path, like we're all destined for different things, and certain people are here to like work on their consciousness and share about that. But for someone who is on the path and who's, kind of engaging now, like the deeper layers, one of the things that I think is a complete non-negotiable if you are on a spiritual path is to have a spiritual practice. It sounds really obvious, but, you know, even I didn't have a very solid one. I mean, you know, I would, you know, do the practices here and there when I was immersed in that, you know, when I would like assist, be on a retreat or hold a retreat, or like when I would be in it, obviously the practice would be there. But for me now, it's a complete non-negotiable that every single day I have some kind of connection to spirit. It's like not even a question. And for me, like the connection to spirit is a relationship like all other relationships that require like an equal give and take. There needs to be reciprocity. And now we very often, I think, you know, as a consumer society in the modern Western world, we want to feed ourselves. We want like to, like I heard someone who I think is an awesome teacher said that, you know, like people are getting spiritually obese. And I think it's a really good analogy. It's like just like gorging on like, you know, from the kind of like the trinkets to, you know, the courses. And it's important to leave time for integration as well. And build things slowly. And I think it's really not in our nature in the modern Western world to just have patience. But, you know, the indigenous lineages, well, first of all, they get initiated much earlier in their lives because, you know, it's part of their upbringing. And especially if you are called to be a medicine person or a shaman or like the healer, you will be you know, kind of like ushered into that role. And something will happen, obviously, to you also to step into it, like physically, spiritually, emotionally. But it's really important to know that this needs to be integrated into your daily life. And to kind of like stop thinking that, you know, there is a magic wand, and myself included, when I stepped into spirituality. And sometimes I still have that idea, you know, I'll be healed. You know, when I understand this, or when I transcend this, I'll be healed. But I've come to understand that, you know, like for as long as I have a body, I will keep on learning. And I think, you know, to go back to your original question, like it's really important to know that we can sort of bring in the light and the dark into our daily lives and into our practices, but it takes time. And it's sometimes it's boring. It's like doing the taxes, you know, and it's not all like, you know, kind of ecstatic and elating experiences. It's like people who do a lot of plant medicine, or people who do plant medicine in general, it's really important that they are aware of the fact that the ceremony and the actual experience with the plant is going to be, you know, maybe not even as important as the integration process, because all our spiritual experiences are here to help us with the human and the daily. So like trying to remove the darkness, or, you know, like I've actually recently more replaced it with our humanness rather than our darkness, that we're humans and we're not perfect beings. And our humanity or our humanness is the gateway to our awakening. So it's actually a question of perspective. Everything is a question of perspective, obviously. So for me, a spiritual practice is really important, and a connection to spirit and working, you know, like in animistic ways. And animism is what most indigenous cultures would kind of, you know, live based on those principles that, you know, everything has a spirit, you know, from everything that is living. So plants, animals, elements, stones, obviously other individuals and other spirits, you know, that we don't have the same density with, but the ancestors or the star nations, or, you know, there are a lot of guides out there that you know, that are waiting to connect with us, but we also have to be willing to engage in that relationship if we want to establish it.
Okay, so you've opened up a couple more questions I want to dig into.
Sure.
So in our Grow Free spiral, one of the key points is practice. And we we haven't done it over summer so much, but we have like a weekly sanctuary and Skillshare, and we kind of, some of our work, you know, we bring in what is practice, different ways to practice, and almost what I've come to feel is I don't know if this is kind of what you were saying, but it's a quality as much as a specific activity. So I know for a while in my practice, my yoga practice, I was re-traumatizing myself on the yoga mat. I would get up in the morning and I'd be so overwhelmed, and I would get on the mat and feel like I needed to do something very strong to help me get through the day of the things that I had planned. Now looking back, even this morning, you know, having the ability now for it to be much more devotional, much more attentive and respectful. It can be boring, but it's what I feel I've come to learn is almost I can do anything in a way that is practice, and I can do any practice in a way that is not practice. Can you share a little bit about what you do? A little bit deeper into the practicalities of practice for you?
So for me, there are a few things. I think anyone who's a practitioner, and I'm very fortunate to be in this shamanic training, because we do, for instance, like a sweat lodge every time we meet, and that would clear out a whole bunch of stuff, because as practitioners or sensitives, or however you want to call it, healers in whatever shape or form that is, we take on quite a lot, whether we like it or not. That's kind of like how it works. And so one part of the practice is to stay as clean as you can. So like go walk in nature, do like fire, like light a fire, work with the fire, or connecting with the elements, I think is really a great gateway to sort of practice with cleansing somehow. And so cleansing, connecting with your allies, whoever those are. And in the book, I go through like all the different types of allies that there are, from the elements to the nature spirits, to animals, to plants, to the rocks, and to start establishing a relationship with. Sometimes obviously we'll go for the ones that we have the most ease with, which is fine. And I think it's a good place to start. And then, a bit further along the way, it's interesting to reflect on, what element do I have the most resistance to, or what aspect, like, is it like underworld, shadow stuff, ancestral stuff that I don't like, or do I not like the more starry up there kind of stuff? But to start with, like, really seeing what resonates in terms of spirits, like it could be your grandmother, it could be a saint, it could be what else could it be, like a tree, it could be a specific place. I think we have a lot of connection with different places also. And one really important aspect of the practice, so there is the connection and taking the time, and I think consistency is more important than length. And that's, I guess, true also with yoga and that kind of stuff. Like, there's no point doing 5 hours of yoga once a month, like if you do half an hour every day, you will have much more benefit. So it's the same. And I think to also find a practice that people genuinely enjoy. Like, I know that there are certain practices that just won't work for me, certain types of meditation and stuff like that. I know that I'll never do them. For me, nature, like going out in nature. And another aspect that I think is really important, that I've really kind of learned much more about since I started my shamanic training, is making offerings to spirit. And that's all traditions all over the world that have an animistic consciousness and that integrate spirit. They will have altars. You have those, like a lot in Asia. If you go to Indonesia and or India, you'll have altars, shrines that are really obvious. Here in the modern Western world, it would be more church. But I work a lot with nature. So I will go to a place where I repeatedly go, and I will make offerings there. An offering is obviously something that can go back to the earth. So don't put like anything plastic or even metal is not, great. Something that can really be compost. So flowers, fruits, seeds, and then just like offer it from your heart and have an intention. I think it's very important to bring intention into our practice as well, not to just kind of like be flimsy about it. Sometimes we don't have an aim. Maybe the aim is, just feeding the connection. So that's something that I do like often. And then I think if there are any kind of instruments or tools, and I'll include like dancing or painting or, that you can bring into that takes you out of your head, that is not like, kind of like mind-based, that's very helpful too. So I love the drum, like the shamanic drum or the rattle, like those two are really, they come very easily to me and I love them, it's like, or dancing, I think is also really good, because also when you're on this path, you need to move your body. I mean, the whole body, mind, and spirit, is true. It's a utopia to think that we can only do it through meditation or only do it through and we don't take care of our bodies, or we don't take care of our spirit and then we just take care of our mind. Like it all goes together. So moving and nature, I think, are essential as well to bring into a practice. I'm not saying do all of this every day, but like the having an altar at home. I have one, and a lot of people who have practices will have an altar at home. I think that's the best way to start. And then just let yourself be guided. What calls you, what interests you, what are you given, who are you meeting, these things.
Yeah. And that's about feeding your relationship with spirit.
Yeah.
And if we think about the theme of embracing darkness, maybe taking off the connotations that we often have on it as being something to avoid, or even if we think of balance, maybe like the next theme in the next month, we'll move on and we'll be like, okay, let's speak about balance rather here. The more we develop our relationship with spirit, and you described it as allies in yoga or other traditions, often they speak about qualities, activating qualities within you. That relationship with spirit is part of what helps hold that balance, right?
Yeah. And because to me, it's like we hand it over to a higher power, like if anyone who's done 12 steps programs will understand this, like hand it over.
Yeah.
And there is a handing it over, obviously, and just being like kind of wanting to get rid of something and not wanting to deal with it. And there is handing over as in a conscious act of surrendering, understanding that there's only so much that is in my control. And I think that's a massive lesson. That's a huge, huge lesson that we all experience at one point in our life. It's like you think you can control everything, but like, the universe has bigger plans. And for that, I think the relationship to spirit is essential. However, it manifests, whether it's, a higher power, a god, a goddess, nature, a guru, like a deity, whatever it is that we feel that we're working with when we really need to surrender. And we're like, okay, like, help me. I'm handing this over to you. Please show me the way. Please help me. I mean, it's a massive lesson in humility.
Yeah. I think as we kind of move into probably the last question I had on my list, this is kind of threading us there. My last question was kind of culturally, what do we feel we need to embrace culturally to allow us to balance, to have more balance? And what I'm interested there is, and you spoke earlier about your own experience of recognizing you needed to ask for help, for professional help.
Yeah.
And then just now you spoke about, it's a big lesson in humility and coming to that point of surrender. And I mean, for me, asking for help has been super difficult. I've gotten myself into places of overwhelm where I probably then overwhelmed other people around me. But actually being able to genuinely ask for help at the appropriate moment. And what I've done, I've looked back, into sort of childhood experiences of where that, there was one last year, probably around the time you were asking for help, wherever you were, I was like, why can I not ask for help? What keeps stopping me here? And going back into some experiences that I had where I just stopped trusting my parents for various different reasons that was going on. When I was writing this last question about what could we be embracing culturally, very present in my mind as the mum of a 4-year-old is parenting. How do we parent in a way that allows our children to accept the big feelings they have, to trust that if they do ask for help, they will be heard, and the support will be there. I don't know what, culturally, what do you have ideas, feelings around?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm a mother of 2 boys. I have an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old, and I think the best gift we can give ever to our children is our own healing, and accept also that we are not perfect. I think it's difficult to, all generations have their own difficulties, and then the following generation heals the one before, and especially nowadays, like I feel like as a parent, you need to be a nutritionist, you need to be a therapist, you need to be like a teacher. It's how do you do it, and it's great to bring consciousness, but it's a lot of pressure, I find, on parents, especially in the more conscious parenting arena. For me, it has been to be honest with my kids about what's going on with me, but also not overwhelm them with something that, they can't handle, because it's not for them to handle, and kids always feel responsible. I think culturally, we're seeing a massive change that is happening, and unfortunately and fortunately, the aftermath of the pandemic, and also what we've been through culturally before, has brought a massive mental health crisis. And, like the young people are having a really, really difficult time, because at a crucial age of, like when they step into their, social dynamics and everything, they were locked down. They were literally locked down. And the effect that has had on them, collectively, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of unknown, there's a lot that's coming to the surface for humans to process, like what the people in leadership positions have been up to. And thanks to the internet, in a way, like all these things can't be hidden anymore. So that's a lot to process. And I think, especially having 2 boys, I've thought a lot about, like this whole thing about, how do you process emotions, and their generation is much more aware and much more like comfortable with, mental health speak and what's going on for them. They talk about it quite openly. And if somebody's having, this issue and that issue, it's not really judged. It's more like, oh, they go and speak to a teacher and say, oh, I heard this person is going through this, they need help. Rather than, I guess our generation would have been a completely different story. And I think, human like evolution in terms of consciousness also evolves with generations. So entire generations are going to go through things that, they have to transmute based on the wounding of the previous ones. One thing I think parents can do is also like do ancestral healing. Obviously address what's going on in their immediate family unit, but we carry so much, through the ancestry, and especially if you're like a healer or a person who brings healing or disrupts, kind of cycles within a family, there's a lot that you're going to bring with you. And that's, I think, it's hard work, but it's a massive gift for the future generation. And in terms of like embracing the darkness and bringing it to balance, it really is, you know, like, as you were saying, like it's a cultural thing. How do we make it okay for people to talk about how they're feeling and needing help and all of this? I mean, I also grew up like with this whole belief system that I'm still working through, that, you know, like I need to get through all this on my own. I need to be able to be strong enough to go through something on my own. But I've realized that actually that belief system is more rooted in, what if I open myself up and I'm vulnerable and I get hurt and I get disappointed, I get dismissed, I get rejected, I get abandoned, you know? So doing everything on your own and not asking for help, for me, is a protection mechanism. And then it's like, what's underneath all that? So it's like the onion that never ends.
And that's that unconscious.
I
heard a really lovely description of that fear of rejection, you know, that being our animal mentality, the herd animal, and in the herd, the weak ones would be
they would die
rejected. So we're holding, you know, not even ancestral memory from the, you know, humanity, that however many previous generations, but from like biology going back. And what he was describing was that, I don't know if he made it as a suggestion or an exploration, that humanity starts to look to the plant consciousness rather than the animal consciousness, and that instead of seeing our wounds and our weakness as something that will be rejected for, turning it into our flowers and using our sensitivities in the way that flowers did. What plants did was they used their vulnerability, their sensitivity, and it became something attractive and supportive.
That's beautiful.
That was really beautiful, and it really gave me a permission. My part of my purpose in this last few years and setting up Grow Free has been to be as honest as I can be about my vulnerability, about the coping mechanisms I have on top of my vulnerability, to, you know, in that same way, not overwhelming by sharing, but by aiming to be an example. And it's a process to get there, to keep showing that next bit. And that just to like tie up, because I think, you know, this has been an amazing conversation. I love the way you described earlier your work with some of the Indigenous elders, and you kept referring to people with unbroken lineages, and then you described your training that you're doing now, which you said related more to modern cultures, and how do we bring this wisdom back here. You know, we're at it's as tough as some of these years have been personally, it is also an exciting time, I think, for humanity, where you know, we do have a lot to transmute. A lot has been coming up to the surface. That can be tough to transmute, but the fact is, it's transmuting, it's changing. There's a lot that has been unconscious, it's becoming more conscious. We've also got this vast amount of technology that we're quite inexperienced and young at dealing with, you know, all this digital stuff that's equally bringing about a lot of consciousness. You said, you know, you can't hide, governments can't hide as much, or any thoughts on this merging of these unbroken lineages, this ancient wisdom and this new technology?
Well, I think we're probably like in the middle of all of that, because, you know, the Indigenous people, for instance, in South America, they have really big you know, they don't have easy lives. You know, they have a lot of stuff that maybe we would, as a, you know, a culture, gone through already, in terms of what's happening in, you know, in like waste, for instance, or corruption. I mean, I'm not saying we're not corrupt here, but like I just get super sad when I see, you know, like what's happening in the Amazon, or how Indigenous people are treated in the US, for instance. And because I feel so much for them, you know, they're wisdom keepers that are guarding the sacred, and they're the ones who are being persecuted. I mean, you know, it's not on, that's what happened to the witches here in this part of the world. So I think it goes more towards the whole thing with technology, is like, because I've thought about it a lot, and I'm, you know, like obviously having kids and their screens and seeing what that does and everything. And I've kind of like really like demonized technology, because it brings so much conflict. And I'm not the only one. I have a lot of friends who say exactly the same. But somebody brought up a point that was quite interesting, is like, you know, it's all about the people who are behind the coding that matter, and their intention. And not so much the technology itself. It's, for instance, if you take the example of social media, how do people use social media individually? Do you go there because you want to pick a fight and you want to get like into arguments? Or do you want to just like use it for self-validation? Do you use it to spread a message? You know, technology, as you said, I think we're very young, you know, like in our connection to technology. And when I think about, you know, like these ancient civilizations, like, you know, Atlantis or Egypt and all of these, that, you know, I don't know, because I haven't experienced them firsthand. I think it's hard to say like what happened, what happened there or not. But I think the use of technology and the consciousness that is like ruling technology is what matters. So if we can get the people who are coding in the right space and bring in, you know, like the wisdom of all these, you know, ancient lineages, unbroken, you know, lineages, then the merger of those two can create, you know, like incredible opportunities.
Yeah, and fast, probably.
Yeah,
that's true. That's one thing we have on our project list at Grow Free. We're working with a design company to create an online platform for the peer support that really, it uses what we understand about the nervous system, how to create a sense of safety, what supports the ability to be authentic. Because similarly, I've up and down with the relationship with technology, but I don't know what it is. Somehow, like, this is part of what we're doing.
Yeah.
It feels important, and there's the potential there to harness that, to to learn from nature, to model it on nature, to look at, well, what cues us to feel safe? How can we put that into an online platform? So that's an exciting little line we've got going
absolutely.
here. So just very quickly then, how can people find you? Well, how could they work with you if they've heard this and been inspired?
On my website, which is akasha-awakening.com, and I guess it will be written
underneath,
or on Instagram, which I'm the most kind of active on, and that's my handle is at akasha_awakening, and Akasha is AKASHA, and it means the ether. So it's the awakening of the ether, the awakening of spirit. So those are really the two main places to find me and to connect with me. And I'd be super happy to support whoever feels that this is, you know, the right approach for them.
Yeah, and it looked, I think I read, was it on your website, so one-to-one, you have was it a series of sort of 3 sessions you do with people?
So I have an awakening mentorship, which is over 3 months. And because I feel that the thing is, and sometimes people need just like the one session, and that's what I've been doing a lot. And I've kind of moved away a bit from that, because an awakening is a process, you know, and it's not one session that is going to solve everything. Sometimes we just need, that. And then I also offer soul plan readings, which is based on your birth name and your soul destiny and your, your challenges, your talents and your goals. And it's a whole methodology, behind your birth name. That is, it's all in the birth name. So that's more like an activation than anything else. Usually when people do that, starts opening up a whole bunch of stuff. So those are the main kind of offerings that I have. And I'm contemplating bringing back the occasional one-to-one as well.
I'm sure at some point I'll try and talk you into a course within Grow Free.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Oh really? Oh wow. Well, I would love to talk about that because we're looking to bring in more practitioners. So
yeah, let's see.
Let's keep the conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Catherine, it's been an absolute, I say it's a pleasure because some of this stuff is, it's challenging to talk about, but it's super inspiring. And like you described, with the attention and devotion you've seen in the elders you've worked with, I really appreciate the energy that you put into this and your willingness to share. So thank you.
And thanks for having me. It was a really lovely conversation. It's really lovely to connect with you and your work and what you're also putting out there in the world. And so thank you so much.
Brilliant.